Just as a
Go
quick
ahead.
thing, it's embarrassing to say this. I truly hope that it changes. I have considered more over the past like 2 months leaving this country more than I ever have in my entire life, which is very sad. I had an argument with Pisco, and I pretty virulently attacked this idea, or I rejected this idea because I think it was Pisco that told me, he was like, the Republicans will never confirm someone again. And I think my argument against it was like, listen, like I'm sure they did it in the last year, but there's no way for 4 years. You're saying that if Kamala gets elected and somebody steps down immediately, you think Republicans will hold it up for 4 years? You think they won't appoint or they won't approve a Supreme Court justice? And I was pretty adamant that could never happen. But I just thought about that more over the next couple days, and maybe it's because I'm so steeped in all the January 6th stuff. I actually don't know. If Donald Trump were to put out the call, and it's also one thing that I never realized as much as well, and again, especially going over this J6 stuff, now I see the patterns way more clearly. Donald Trump is very much a dictator in terms of how he runs his party, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're not doing what Donald Trump wants, he always reminds people when they were elected because of him, I helped you. What a schmuck I was. Probably this Brian Kemp loser, right? We helped you. He always reminds people that if you backstab him, you're gone, right? The voters are going to remember in 2022. They'll remember who wasn't loyal to us. They'll remember who didn't help. If you do end up backstabbing him, your political career in the Republican Party is gone, right? My parents think, I don't know if this is the broad opinion, but my parents think McCarthy is a rhino. Is that normal for most Republicans now?
So what's funny is he's pretty loyal to Trump, especially now that he's out of power. He's fundraising for Trump and everything. But yeah, he was seen as a rhino.
Yeah, McCarthy. Would you have imagined that? Would you have imagined that a few years ago, before the whole House fiasco, that McCarthy would be a rhino?
No, he bent the knee to him. He was. You could make the argument, Stephen, that if there's any single person. If there is one person who is singularly responsible for Donald Trump's political rehabilitation, you could make the argument that it was Kevin McCarthy going down to Mar-a-Lago after January 6th and basically bringing elected establishment Republicans back into the fold. Mm-hmm. You could make that argument. That's how loyal he was.
Yeah. So I mean, he really does run the like a dictatorship. Like if you backstab him, or I say backstab him, what I really mean is if you oppose any part of anything he says ever. That's true of his party. It's also true of the media apparatus. Remember, Fox News did the Dominion lies because they were so scared because Trump was attacking them. Remember, Trump lost his mind after that Arizona call. And Donald Trump was starting to make all these other appearances on other media networks because he thought that Fox News were traitors. And remember, we've seen this on Twitter, on X, within the past month, I think, right? When a bad poll comes out, what does Donald Trump do? He comes out, and I think it was a Fox News poll, wasn't it? Where he says like, they do fake polling now, or it's not trustworthy. So you're in this state where you're constantly beholden to this guy in a way that even Republicans have never done in the past that I've been aware of. And it's insane the way that he runs stuff. So as I start to think about that more, and then I revisit the argument I had with Pisco, would Republicans stop Democrats from ever nominating or appointing another Supreme Court justice? I don't think so. But if Donald Trump told them not to, they absolutely wouldn't, if Donald Trump was still popular in the party. So I think that's the thing that started to shift my mind a lot. And reading the Supreme Court case opinions, especially on the Colorado thing, especially on the immunity thing, and then seeing how composition of the Supreme Court is now, and for who knows how many years, another, 2 decades? When are we supposed to? Yeah, it's going to be this conservative of a court. So yeah, that and me and the Supreme Court right now. Yeah, it's really bad.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth because I think that you have the right of it. But I was curious to see what exactly the tipping point was.
Remember that. I want to respond to something real quick in chat.
Yeah,
Somebody said this, and I'm so glad you said this. Okay, good job. You're becoming norm-pilled. Aaron Dallin said, "What kind of president has key head media figures on speed dial and will directly call any government worker he wants to manipulate?" Yes, that is so strange, very queer, very unprofessional, very norm-shattering, and very that should make you wonder, is it normal? Did Barack Obama call in to MSNBC to complain about Bush or McConnell? Was that just an ordinary thing? Or was Barack Obama calling states saying hey, why haven't you guys, I don't even know what the deal would have been back then. It's very, very, very weird, very strange, very not good. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, well, also, again, I don't know if we talked about this, but let's set aside Trump's lingering influence, his direct tyrannical influence on party politics, even when he's out of power. I mean, when he says he's implied it multiple times that he's violated the Logan Act by having conversations with foreign dignitaries and stuff like that. And I think I even asked you, like, curious what the FBI you think would be looking at, to potentially investigate, if it would need to be more than a couple of statements or whatever. But yeah, like, he gives the impression that he's way too involved in the internal mechanisms of governance. I understand that he's still running for office and everything, but yeah, to your point, it's like he has not loosened his grip at all. For me, I listening to people like Jamie Raskin and Sheldon Whitehouse, who are, one's a Democratic senator and the other one's a Democratic congressman, you should definitely, if you ever get, I mean, you've seen Raskin because he's part of the January 6th select committee, so you've read.
Oh, I have, the guy with the hair.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
No, he's really, really good. He's a constitutional scholar, and he was the one who he wrote this op-ed. I think it was in the Washington Post back in 2019, and I didn't read it until a few years ago. But it was basically debunking the myth of like three equal branches. He's like, we don't have three equal branches. We have three separate branches who are all powerful, or who are each powerful, I should say. And there's checks and balances generating from all of them. But he's like, the branches were never conceived to be equal. There was a top-down order in some respects. Congress was always meant to be the most powerful. The president, the second most powerful, and the Supreme Court, the least powerful one.
If I hear something that starts with the term House Republicans, I'm thinking like Finkelstein. Like, there is so much garbage that passes through the House Republican stuff. It's unreal. It's unbelievable.
Did you know?
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you know that they because they're in the majority, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they technically have the power in the House. They can't get must-pass bills past their own coalition. Like they're constantly fighting amongst themselves. But one thing they did make the time for is they wanted to rename Dulles Airport after Trump, and they wanted to rename like the Gulf of Mexico, or like nearshore waters near the Gulf of Mexico, like the Trump free zone ocean area, or what. Like, it's such cringe cultish that they make the time for. It's pretty pathetic. But the good news is I think we're favored to take back the House. But what's
also
interesting
that,
about
by the way, how's that impeachment going? Right, the one that Jim Jordan did, and they got the report out.
So that's so funny because they dropped this report. They're like, yes, President Biden committed impeachable offenses, but we're not going to recommend an impeachment vote.
Like,
because
do you
they
understand?
Don't have the numbers.
Lack of response. Like, this is what I say again: lack of accountability, lack of responsibility. And people don't understand this. Okay, they're acting like a belligerent minority in the House.
Right.
And they're a majority.
Right.
That's insane. It's unbelievable. How do you lose your speaker seat? It's unbelievable. Do you have any idea how dysfunctional you have to be? Also, this, right? And this is even broader than this, right? Over the ACA stuff, okay? I don't want to say voting is done for show, but you don't call votes without knowing who's going to vote for what.
That was Nancy Pelosi's rule. She says you never, ever, ever bring a vote to the floor unless you would bet
obviously.
your life.
And this is like this is the government, right? Nobody's going to do this. You're not going to be like, okay, well, let's vote on this and see if this major legislation passes, right? McCain voting no on that ACA thing. What the f*** are you doing, Republican? Yeah, it's unreal to me that how incompetent they are, even when they are the majority party. And people they want to trust these guys to run the country. You can't even run the fucking House. Remember, first example, history of the entire United States ever, of a majority party losing their speaker seat.
Yeah, so that it took like 10 times to get McCarthy that position in the first place, exclusively because of his own party. He had Matt Gaetz and members of the Freedom Caucus cock-blocking him, and he couldn't get the votes. Remember, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. I think it took like 10 to 13 times to finally get him the seat. Mm-hmm. Then, to your point, he loses it 8 weeks later or 8 months later. And by the way, do you remember, just reliving like memory lane here, the cope that we got from centrists? I think it might have even been Sitch and Adam, that they were upset that the Democrats
wouldn't come and support and save.
Yeah,
bro.
Right.
There was a debate that I had a few days ago. Who was I debating? And I think I was trying to ask, give me one example, because it's always supposed to be, well, the Democrats need to compromise and make things right. The Democrats need to compromise. And I was like, can you give me one example of the Republicans having to compromise? When have we ever said the Republicans need to compromise us ever? And I think, was I debating, guys? Does anybody remember this? The only example that he could give when the Republicans had to compromise with themselves in order to get something done. And I'm like, bro, what the f***? You guys are so crazy. You're the only example that you can give me was Republicans compromising with themselves on something in order to.
It was the filibuster. It was Wick. It was Wick. I remember that.
Oh,
yeah.
was it? Yeah, it was Wick with the filibuster.
Yeah,
oh yeah, that was the only example they gave. Yeah, yeah. Oh my God. Sorry.
Yeah, Trump wanted to break the filibuster, and McConnell said no. And even that, just not to pick on Wick here, but just even that idea. So McConnell's primary objectives were to stack the federal judiciary, stack the courts, and tax cuts. He didn't need to break the filibuster there because all they needed was a simple majority. And this is how you know McConnell would absolutely break the filibuster if his priorities were on the line, because they changed Senate rules to make those three things happen. Yeah. So there's a rule in the Senate judiciary. It was called the blue slip, and it's existed for decades. It's not in the Constitution. It's one of those norms that's existed for both parties. So if Senator Bunnell of Florida wants to disagrees with President Josiah's judicial nominee for his state, you can give a blue slip. Senator Bunnell could say, hey, listen, Mr. President, I don't like this candidate. Find a different one. I'm giving my blue slip. And it was basically like a soft veto, and both parties respected it for years. Trump wins the presidency, Republicans win the Senate. The first thing they do is kill the blue slip rule, which means that no Democrat could block one of Trump's nominees in their state. Then, when Biden wins the presidency, the Democrats keep that rule, and this is for circuit judges, not district judges. And Republicans are bitching that the Democrats didn't restore the blue slip rule. They're like, wait a minute. I don't, I think it was Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. She's like, I don't like Biden's nominee for Tennessee. He's too liberal. And the Democrats, for the first time ever, were like, well, tough. You were the ones who got rid of this goddamn rule. We begged you not to do it. And now you want us to put it back because it's inconvenient to you. But the point is, they changed the rule to accommodate McConnell's wishes. Right? So what I'm saying is, you just know that it wasn't a principled stance McConnell had about the filibuster. If the filibuster would have gotten in the way of, there's another example, the Supreme Court. So the filibuster, he did a carve out. Mm-hmm. He nuked the filibuster for Supreme Court appointments. So my point is, like, that example was so because McConnell has proven for his priorities, he is absolutely willing to kill the filibuster. And for some of the other priorities, the filibuster doesn't matter. Like, the filibuster wouldn't have helped Trump repeal the ACA because all he needed was a simple majority. That's why McCain was able to kill it, to your point. So I don't know. Like, it's not even a good example. It would be a bad example even if it were valid, because it's, to your point, Republicans fighting amongst themselves. But yeah, just a total asymmetry of expectation. And the Republicans, it's almost like they get away with not having to be a governing party. So, like, if they're in the minority, they don't have to help the majority govern. If they're in the majority, they don't have to help the minority govern. Democrats have been more responsible for legislation passing the House since Republicans took the majority. Like, if not for Democrats passing like these continuing resolutions, the government wouldn't be funded because there are enough Republicans voting against it. Like, that is how dysfunctional they are. And it's so frustrating because, to your point, they get rewarded for it. Like, they make the mess. Democrats either don't clean it up perfectly or quickly enough, mm-hmm. or whatever. And then they point to Democrats and say, they failed to clean up our mess. You should put us in a position to make a mess again. I can't square it. It's insane.
Yeah, I don't know if it has to be like a civics lesson or what, but it's very frustrating. Yeah, the accountability thing is a big thing I'm focused on now with media people and with government. It's just unreal. But the problem is the correction needs to be brutal. It can't be baby steps. I said, like, just with the last media coverage, somebody actually posted a cute little graph. I don't know if this is in my subreddit or somewhere else, but it was like, does this seem biased? And it was like a bar. It was just like a little bar chart. And one was like number of corrections for Trump and number of corrections for Kamala. And then they were like, well, does this seem biased? And then there was a second graph, and it was number of corrections for Trump next to number of incorrect things Trump said, and then number of corrections for Kamala next to incorrect things Kamala said. I was like, oh, well, okay, well, this would make more sense. Yeah. The Republicans are just like they're in fantasy land right now. Like, they're not real human beings to like negotiate with. They're just crazy obstructionists that under McConnell, for as much as I think he tried to obstruct the of Obama's presidency and played, party politics and all that, I think I think McConnell has a conservative vision for America that he wants at all costs. But now the problem is the tools that he's used to ramrod, okay, these crazy conservative ideas are now being used for anti-American ideas, which is scary because the Republican constituency flipped on that very quickly, where they're like, oh, okay, well, we can do these anti-democratic things to get like Republican stuff passed, right? Well, we can do anti-democratic things to get the Republic destroyed. It's like, okay, well, yeah, it's very annoying.
Well, and what's funny is McConnell, I don't know if I said this to you, but I said this to somebody, is like McConnell's almost like, Victor Frankenstein in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. He's like a victim of his own creation because, again, I want to make it clear, I don't think McConnell is a principled actor at all. I think like even when it comes to preserving the filibuster, it's purely because in order for him to do what he needed to do, he didn't need to break the filibuster. And when he did need to break the filibuster, like with passing Supreme Court nominees and stuff, he did, right? So it just, anyone who thinks that he is a principled actor is a fucking idiot. But to your point, he also is not reckless, right? So he won't break a thing unless he really needs to break a thing to secure a political victory. And he's persona non grata in his own party. I mean, we've heard reports, we've seen examples of prominent Republican senators publicly talking McConnell. Like Josh Hawley is a good example of the schmuck from Missouri, the one who on the J6 footage. Have you gotten to this point? The one who held his fist up to the rioters, and then they caught him on camera running down the hallway away from them. That asshole. So he's like talking McConnell because McConnell is seen as insufficiently loyal to Trump. And I also don't know if you know this, but McConnell's going to serve out the rest of his term. But after the election in November, he's resigning from leadership. He's basically doing what Nancy Pelosi did and basically saying, I'm not going to be the Republican leader anymore. So right now,
did Pelosi, is she actually, I thought she kept talking about it, but she hasn't actually yet.
No. She didn't resign from Congress. She resigned from the leadership. She's no longer part of the Democratic. She is not part of the Democratic leadership at all on paper. She, of course, still carries enormous influence because she's Nancy goddamn Pelosi, but she's not the minority whip or, the minority vice whip or anything like that. She is just the representative from that one district in California. And so McConnell is a victim of his own making, I think, in a way by Trump. But
I appreciate that, Destiny.
All right, bye.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.